to me, and aiding and abetting that whole process. And almost certainly, according to the information I've heard from sources that are normally reliable and in a position to know things, she almost certainly was the one who came up with that whole idea, that let's do this. Here's an idea, Diane Rollert, we can do this to get rid of the protester. Almost certainly Sue Montgomery did that. So anyway, getting back to Sue Montgomery's claim to fear for her personal safety. You know, the whole thing with criminal harassment is that the complainant has to fear for their personal safety. They also have to have reasonable grounds to fear for their safety. And additionally, the suspect, if you want to use that term, the alleged criminal harasser, has to know that they are harassed. And I would like to think that they don't mean that in the broad sense of the word, but more in the sense of what criminal harassment is, which is basically causing people to have reasonable grounds to fear for their safety. So I never believed that Sue Montgomery genuinely feared for her personal safety. I believe that she told an expedient lie to the police because she absolutely had to tell that lie in order to get me arrested for criminal harassment. If she didn't tell the police that she feared for her personal safety, I would not have been arrested for criminal harassment. So she had to say that in order to get me arrested, and I think that's what happened. I don't think she was genuinely fearing a physical attack on her or anything else, and there's actually evidence that supports that. For instance, in a phone interview with Kevin Metcalfe of the Canadian Journalists for Freedom of Expression, some months, I believe, after my arrest, so in early 2018, Sue Montgomery was interviewed by Kevin Metcalfe as part of the Canadian Journalists for Freedom of Expression, trying to determine how they were going to respond to this attack on freedom of speech and charter rights and so on. And Kevin Metcalfe told me that he had straight up asked Sue Montgomery if she feared that I would physically attack her, and according to Kevin Metcalfe, she responded no, that she did not have any fear that I would physically attack her. So this is in early 2018, months after I'd been arrested. Sue Montgomery told Kevin Metcalfe, or at least allegedly told Kevin Metcalfe, because I wasn't there and I haven't heard a recording or anything. It's based on him telling me this, and it's also based on the CJFE stating this in the statement that they did put out. She told Kevin Metcalfe that no, she didn't fear that I was going to physically attack her. So that suggests to me that she essentially lied to the police, and did so in order to A, prevent me from going to city council meetings, to ask her questions about her complicity in Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse cover-up efforts, especially her participation in abuse of misuse of the SPM police force and the criminal justice system to shut down my protest in front of the Unitarian Church of Montreal for 1 full year in 2007, 2008, and other things that are pertinent, I think, to municipal politics. Sue Montgomery, in my opinion, which, by the way, is not only very reasonable and based on evidence, but protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. I have freedom of opinion according to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom. So in my opinion, based on actual evidence, Sue Montgomery is guilty of lying to the police, lying to Crown prosecutors, lying to actually, as far as lying to judges go, in sworn testimony, she actually told a variety of lies in the 2 trials that I recently had, one for breach of conditions and one for the actual criminal harassment charges. She outright lied, like told complete untruths. She also distorted the truth, minimized things or exaggerated things and so on. But she told some outright lies, total fabrications, complete bullshit. In sworn testimony to 2 Quebec court judges. That's called perjury. That's called contradictory testimony, and both of those things are criminal acts, as is making a false report to the police. I did not accuse Sue Montgomery of making a false report to the police because it would be very difficult, I think, to prove beyond reasonable doubt that she did not fear for her personal safety, even though she claimed to. Yes, I can present evidence showing a lack of fear, public statements she made, videos, and so on, but proving it beyond reasonable doubt might be difficult. It really depends, I think, on the judge too, and the jury, if there's a jury. So I said, you know what, this is so difficult to prove beyond reasonable doubt that I won't bother with that. And I probably can't know, because it may be that the time limit for doing so has run out, although I'm not sure about that. I will be looking into it. But when it comes to perjury, when it comes to contradictory testimony, I am absolutely in a position to bring perjury and contradictory testimony accusations against Sue Montgomery. File a police report and ask the SPVM to investigate Sue Montgomery for perjury and contradictory testimony, and ideally have her charged, tried, and convicted of those crimes. So anyway, getting back to Sue Montgomery's lack of fear, that is why I was acquitted. And I was actually very lucky. I could have proved her lack of fear in various other ways, such as I said, the statements of Kevin Metcalf, such as public statements she made. This evidence was not introduced at all, or was not properly introduced at all during the trial, but what was introduced was a video that I filmed of my protest outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal on March 18th of 2018. So this is like months after I was arrested for alleged criminal harassment of Sue Montgomery. So I was protesting outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal and doing my usual monologue. Normally when I'm protesting, I have the camera hanging from my neck and I'm filming everything to protect myself from false accusations, to record assaults on me and that sort of thing, to record any conversations with the police I may have. So I'm basically running the camera constantly as much as possible to protect myself. But since I have to do that, I do a monologue like I'm doing right now. I'm explaining what the protest is about. So normally the camera's on my chest, right about here. So I'm walking west, and a person is approaching me from the west, walking straight towards me. I didn't really notice it all that much when I'm actually protesting, because I was basically doing the monologue. There was this person in the distance, that I didn't really notice that much. But when they got close to me, they stopped on the sidewalk in front of me, about 8 to 10 feet in front of me. They stopped. They pulled out their cell phone. They took a picture with it, and then they called the police. And when I looked at this person, who was in a parka and I believe had a hood on, so their face wasn't all that visible, it became obvious that it was Sue Montgomery. So here was Sue Montgomery, who on the 5th of December of 2017, 5th of December 2017, had signed a police report claiming the fear for her safety, very deliberately making her way to the Unitarian Church of Montreal, knowing full well that I was there, walking to within 8 or so feet of me, 8 to 10 feet of me, pulling out her phone, taking a picture, and calling the police to try to get me arrested for breach of conditions. Then what Sue Montgomery did is she walked right past me, so she walked literally within a foot or two of me without the slightest fear, and proceeded to kick some of my picket signs in the street. Actually, prior to doing that, she kicked a couple of other picket signs, freestanding picket signs, into the street on Bulmer Street, and then after doing that, she walked past me and she kicked my other picket signs in the street. Again, no sign of fear. She walked right by me. This is all recorded on film. She was totally contemptuous, not the slightest fear shown in her actions, body language, whatever. There's even video of her smiling and even laughing and so on with some of the other members of the church. So I don't think she was afraid at all, although she claims that she was afraid and just being brave, which is total bullshit as far as I'm concerned. So that video essentially introduced reasonable doubt. Judge Flavia Longo saw that video And I can tell you that I saw on her face a change in attitude. Prior to seeing that video, Judge Flavia Longo seemed to be extremely sympathetic to Sue Montgomery. She swallowed all of Sue Montgomery's sob story about fearing for her safety and being harassed for 20 years and blah, blah, blah. Most of it total bullshit. You know, exaggerations and so on. The whole 20-year harassment thing is a gross exaggeration. She's essentially trying to pretend that my protest outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal constitutes psychological harassment of her. Well, excuse me, Sue Montgomery. No, this is not a communication to Sue Montgomery. This is just a figure of speech. This is speaking to the public. Sue Montgomery is again, sorry, lost my train of thought there. I lost train of thought. These things do happen. As I said, this is not a prepared statement. I don't have a teleprompter in front of me. So let's see if I can get back to where I was. Yeah, basically talking about how Sue was basically putting on an act in the courtroom, exaggerating things, you know, claiming it was 20 years of harassment. Well, no, it's actually just my protest. Oh yeah, the point I want to make is that if my peaceful public protest against Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal, very much like this one, constitutes psychological harassment of Sue Montgomery, well then presumably it constitutes psychological harassment of every other member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal, and by the same token, every other protest against every other issue is psychological harassment of whoever the people the protest is against. Does that make any sense at all? I don't think so. So that was the point I want to make. That if my protest outside the Unitarian Church of Montreal can be seen as psychological harassment of Sue Montgomery as an individual person, then the same principle has to apply to pretty well every other Unitarian who sees my protest, and more broadly, it has to apply to pretty well every other peaceful public protest. And I can assure you that my peaceful public protest is much more peaceful than a whole lot of peaceful public protests. I don't make a lot of noise, I don't have a megaphone, you know, so on and so forth. Basically, I'm just holding picket signs and talking like I'm doing right now. Very low level. I'll occasionally raise my voice somewhat when I want